and welcome to the first episode of the Modern Future Podcast with yours truly, KL Smith, at the helm. This has been a long time coming, I think, to get back on the mic and do something creative with my time and energy, and something that I'm really passionate about. So, since this is the first episode, I figured I should do an introduction. What the heck is Modern Future? Talk a little bit about that, and then get into some topics for this podcast. So, again, since this is the very first one, introduction, my name is KL Smith. I have been doing content creation for a very long time now. I was one of the OG YouTube partners back in like 2006 when you had to actually fill in an application and do it the old manual way instead of a lot of the automated systems that get kicked in now. I did that I'm still doing that, I would say now, but I don't nearly post as much as I used to. But I was involved in tech reviews, video games industry, and then transitioned into the actual video game industry. We're developing games and worked at a couple different studios now. I'm currently employed by a studio here in North Carolina. So I've been doing content creation for a long time, did Twitch streaming, and have actually run it was on a podcast. It was a video cast. For about 2 years. I did that with a buddy of mine named Colin Fogel, and we published those all on YouTube. It was called Frag Logic. Talked about video game industry for a really long time there. And with the transition to Modern Future, it's kind of an extension of really growing up, so to speak. I have a family now of 3 daughters, married, I feel like I've basically just gone from being a young adult that was really figuring things out to being just an adult that has a lot of views, both politically, financially, interested in certain things now. And I just make different decisions that I didn't have to worry about, 10 years ago. When I was still doing a lot of content creation. So this really is an embodiment of an extension of a website that I ran called Reflection, where, we did tech, we did gaming, and I say we, it was the people that I work with, was actually a gaming team. We did reviews on a bunch of different topics, but we also did things like clothing culture, sneaker culture, and those are very interesting to me. And now I as of 2020, at the beginning of 2020, I started a website called Modern Future, where I talk more about the things that really interest me now, which is like electric cars, renewable energy, stocks a little bit. So you're going to hear some of that on the show, and just everyday life. And I haven't had too many this is what I'm doing in my life posts, but I did do some posts on there talking about Uber. I did an Uber experiment in the beginning of 2019 with my Model 3. I'm a Tesla owner, and I wanted to see what that was like. I wanted to see people's reactions to it, and so that's part of that. And that's kind of the living portion, but it also represents some of the other things that I mentioned there. So Modern Future is really an extension of just me as a person, and the things that I think about and the things that I want to talk about on the show, or on the podcast, I should say. Maybe I'll turn it into a video cast. We'll see. But on the podcast, and that's more or less the 5-minute introduction on what this is and who I am, and hopefully we'll keep this one going for a long time. I have to record these at crazy hours because again, I have a family of 3. I have a newborn, and I have a 2-year-old, and I have a 7-year-old. So they're all very young and very loud, and it's hard to get quiet time when you're doing a podcast. So all of these will be recorded late, post probably on Tuesdays and Thursdays is what I'm thinking right now. Keep it very, very manageable. I don't plan on these being super long or drawn out, probably 30-minute shows, and we'll see how things go. I can't promise super consistency, but I'm going to do my darndest. So today I am talking about a couple different things. I'm talking about Tesla. I'm talking about solar, more as it relates to the pandemic, which really threw things and the whole world into a bit of a unexpected downturn, I should say, of just life, really. And I'll be talking about some stocks, Apple, Microsoft, and some lifestyle stuff, some changes since COVID has happened. My actual last blog post prior to yesterday, and I'm recording this it was August 2nd, but technically this is related to stuff that I read on August 1st. But my first blog that I published since the pandemic hit was like the 31st. So, and then the last one that I published before that was March 7th, which was like days before we went into a pretty big lockdown. So I pretty much laid low, trying to adjust to like what this new schedule is. My wife was pregnant. I didn't really want to get too involved with too much. And now I'm kind of poking my head up out of the sand going, okay, what were all the things I was doing again? So that's where I'm at. So Tesla, they released their vehicle safety report, and they've been doing this for 2 years. I think the first one came out in 2018. And, I always I find the media to be very fickle about how they decide to report on things, and people's over-reliance on the media as their main source of truth. And not to say that that's good or bad, but sometimes when you just rely on one source of truth, you don't see all of the things that happen in the grand scheme of things. And Tesla has kind of have a love-hate relationship with the media where, if someone gets into an accident in a Tesla, that makes front page news, whereas the other good thing about them is their stock, right? Like everyone loves talking about their stock and Elon Musk and everything he says. And anytime there's controversy, that's the first thing that's published. Never good news. And that's something that I absolutely despise with mainstream media, is their portrayal of just fear and obsession around bad news and just always promoting that. So Tesla's vehicle safety report, I think, was a transition for them to say, like, well, the media is really, going in on us more or less. We need to figure out like how we can combat this with like actual factual data. And the funny thing about data is it's always self-serving, right? And I need to say that right away, because if it wasn't good news, we wouldn't see it published. But relative to, the rest of the industry, this is pretty damn good news. So Tesla's vehicle safety report posted for Q2, miles driven before an accident occurs, basically is what this report covers. And Tesla's really big on autonomous driving. And so I think this really plays into that whole topic of discussion for them as they transition or try to transition the world to autonomous AI powered driving. So the very first bullet, one accident for every 4.53 million miles driven with autopilot engaged. That's a very important note. 4.53 million miles driven, right? One accident. One accident for every 2.26 miles driven without autopilot engaged, but the active safety features enabled. Now, active safety features are things like you go too far to the right and you're about to go off and hit the curb and the car, swerves back over, or you get an alert if you're too close to a car in the passing lane or something like that. Those are the active safety features. And most of the Teslas are all equipped with that. I say most because after 2014 is when active safety features were enabled. Any car before that, which would be, I guess, the Tesla Roadster, but more commonly the Model S, which was first released in 2012. Those two vehicles would be the Tesla models that wouldn't have active safety features because they would have released before 2014 for some models. So that's also an important note, 2.26 million miles. And then the next is without either of those features enabled. That is without autopilot engaged, and without the active safety features enabled. That's 1.56 million miles driven, and there's one accident that occurs. Now, the national average for this, which is data provided by the NHTSA, their most recent data has one accident for every 479,000 miles driven. Now, to put this in the context, that top line, 4.53 million miles, that's basically 10 times better than the U.S. national average for an accident that occurs. So if you look at that data and you go, okay, well, this is pretty dang good, that is what Tesla wants you to believe. Now, what I am really interested in is what this looks like against other cars, very specific models that have similar features to what Tesla has outlined here. Autopilot or some type of autonomous driving, some level of autonomous driving. Active safety features. So as an example, in addition to my Model 3 that, I own, my wife and I also own a Subaru Ascent. And one of the active features there is some of the lightweight autopilot stuff that they have. They have a big camera that stays in between the lines. If you're driving, though, you really have to pay a lot more attention than you do in a Tesla. But it also will brake check you if you get too close or you veer out. It has an alert that it's like a little beep, and it tells you to kind of get back over into your lane. But it will actively brake in situations where it thinks that you're going to hit a car. So I'm curious to see what those what a safety report from Subaru will look like in this same format. So you could do like an apples to apples comparison between certain vehicles that have similar features as the Tesla suite of cars. Now, the reason that this is important is because I feel like if more companies started publishing this data, it would actually play into Tesla's motivated, I guess, role in getting full self-driving passed and for people to jump on board with this, because really the more data that's out there about these features saving lives and keeping people safe, the more it paints a picture of like, hey, we need autonomous driving because there's too many idiots on the road that won't A, pay attention, B, drive while under the influence, C, just don't necessarily know how X driver is going to react and don't necessarily have the reflexes that maybe a computer can achieve. And so that saves their life. So those are things that if the industry wasn't so gung-ho and out to get Tesla, they could work together to actually achieve that goal of really pushing this forward. So that's why this data is really self-serving, and it probably wouldn't be published if it was less than 479,000 miles, then Tesla would be in a heap of trouble. But also, they don't have a whole lot of Teslas on the road. There's certainly not millions of Teslas. There's several 100,000 Teslas out there in the road, especially in the US. And seeing this, if that was the case, and they were underneath that national average, and that would be a lot of accidents for very few cars. So that would be a really bad look. But they don't have a whole lot. So I would also want to see what this looks like scaled up when they have millions of cars out on the road, and the projection for seeing if the accident ratios kind of remain true. Because then that's just more data that paints the picture that they want, which is, hey, autopilot is safer than you stupid human drivers, right? So we'll see. So then next topic is the COVID solar transition. And I'm really interested in this because I've read and heard reports suggesting that COVID is forcing or perhaps renewing focus toward the green energy movement. Basically getting people on board with either going solar or going green or going EV, whatever the case may be. And this is always tough to discuss, at least from solar homes, from a consumer standpoint, because you don't really see the transition to having more people have solar on their rooftop. Like that just doesn't happen. It has to be in your neighborhood. you have to talk to Tom next door because you see someone working on his roof. You go, Tom, you getting solar? He's like, yeah, I'm getting solar, dude. And then Bill and Bob and whoever in your neighborhood that you might talk to, they're all getting solar. That's where you really get to see the transition. Otherwise, like, you're not out, especially during COVID, you're not necessarily out taking joyrides in everyone's neighborhood to see, like, especially taking mental snapshots of like who has solar on their roof to see if this is actually occurring. So I think when they talk about this, it's really in the energy companies that are transitioning to solar rather than consumers. Now, the one case where I see this playing out for consumers, and I really had to try to picture where this could be the case, is situations where you've either been furloughed or you've outright lost your job as a result of COVID, and you know that power bill is coming up. Duke Energy wants that money. First Energy, they want that money. P&G, they want that money. And so in those situations where this monthly bill is coming in and you're home all the time, and so your bills are even jacked up more, that becomes a case where maybe 2 years ago, when you had the option to go solar, you go, oh, I really should have went solar when I had that money, had that opportunity to do so, because I would be energy independent. I wouldn't be running my energy from the solar companies. And that was the only scenario where I could see that playing out from a consumer standpoint, of them thinking, oh man, I really wish I would have went solar. And so maybe perhaps in the transition out of the pandemic and back into normal life, people have a renewed vested interest in going solar. I can honestly attest to really more when I purchased my Model 3 in 2018 than having to do with the pandemic, of wanting to go solar and have that be a part of the whole package. Solar on the roof, hooking it up to the EV car, and then being completely energy independent. And my transition for me happened because I didn't have to pump gas anymore. I was like, oh, wait, this is different. I can just charge at home. I don't have to worry about paying any gas every month. Man, I should really do this with my electricity bill. And then I looked at the cost and I was like, oh, damn, that's a lot of money. That was like the epiphany that I had, was like, oh, it's still pretty expensive. And that was 2 years ago, right? So it's not like it has really gone down that much. But I will say they are making strides to make it less. So the townhome that I was in, which I couldn't get it approved because we had an HOA, but the townhome I was in, I had 2 different companies take a look, give me some quotes, and it was about $10,000 more for the townhome that we were in, which is like 1,200 square feet less than the house that we're in now. And I was like, oh, this actually is looking pretty good with the tax breaks that you would get with it. And all in, for the system that I need for the home, I think I'm at 1,400 kilowatts. And I got quoted for a system that basically gets me net zero. So I'm zeroed out on my power bill. It was like 24 grand. And then you throw in the tax breaks that you get, and you're looking at like 15. And I was like, okay, that's actually not too bad. On top of that, there is a net metering program in my city where, and this wasn't the case, I moved cities, but it's really like 10 minutes away. The previous one didn't have such a good incentive, but the incentive in this city, and because all of the utilities run through them, if you supply your power back to the grid for them, they will take off some money from your water bill. So let's say your bill was $100, your water bill was $30, and you produced $115 worth of energy. 15 of that goes onto your water bill, so you only have a $15 water bill. I was like, oh, well damn, sign me up, right? So that was something that really got me more motivated, I guess, in our new house, more so than COVID. But I could see that being a thing for COVID if you are in a position where you're paying someone every month and you're like, man, I had the money to buy solar and I didn't do it. Now I don't have a job. And also, they're trying to collect this monthly bill from me. I would be interested to hear more about this from other folks. If you're listening to this and you've been following me for a long time, let me know if you've seen this kind of transition from a consumer standpoint to solar in your area, because I'm going to make that leap very soon. Again, I got my quotes in from two different companies. One company is $30,000 less than the other one, but the other one includes some power walls and stuff. So, I think it's a great thing. I am very much so looking to energy independence. I plan on, when I start this project, really documenting the process, what it's like, what happens with our bills, and the whole nine, because it's really exciting to be a part of this transition and having the capability to do so. The next topic for me is Apple stock. Now, Apple stock, I am an Apple stock owner. I'm invested in, I'm long on Apple. I have been for quite some time, but I recently, when their stock price was like 185, or a little bit beneath that, I can't remember if that was last year in December or the year before that in December. Anyway, Tim Cook came out and was like, hey, demand is probably going to be down, our earnings are going to be down, and like people freaked out and they were like, oh God, sell. And that was the time to buy, because it was, now the stock is doing really well. But Apple stock took off at a surprisingly impressive quarter two earnings results. And what I found so fascinating about Apple in particular is earlier this week, again, you guys are going to be listening to this on probably Tuesday, but last week we had the congressional hearings, which would have been about 6 days from when you're listening to this ago on Wednesday, where Tim Cook, Mark Zuckerberg, I never say his name right, Google CEO, and Jeff Bezos were all getting grilled by the antitrust congressional committee. And, just seeing that, I guess, kind of almost ironic turn of events. The day before they're getting grilled by antitrust, the very next day, all of those companies, barring Google, have really blockbuster earnings during this pandemic. Now, I don't necessarily think that this is evidence that they have a monopoly. I think it's more about, like, in a situation where technology needs to be better than the circumstances of going to your traditional 9-to-5 job, brick and mortar job, like tech and online resources and technologies and companies just kind of make sense in this case. Like Zoom, for example, having virtual meetings, they just work. And Amazon, right? Like they had a blockbuster earnings. I think I'm a little surprised by Apple, because I thought that they would take a bigger hit in general, but shockingly impressive results, because they essentially have a business that's almost all based on their hardware, right? Like, I mean, of course they have their subscription services, they have the iTunes store, they have their Apple TV thing now. So like they've really diversified and all of the different revenue sources that are coming in. But I was very surprised to see that the stock went up significantly, and I'm sitting at a very nice spot right now. I can say that much. The moral dilemma I have about this is that, we talk about this antitrust thing, and on one hand, it's like you want to be a very smart investor. You want to make money, right? You want your money to not just sit in a savings account, and especially right now when all the interest rates are getting hammered, and not be working for you. And so I have a moral dilemma, because it's very clear, very evident that many of these companies have been intentionally attempting monopolistic basically practices for almost as long as they've been in existence. And if you're an avid tech investor like myself, these companies represent the future and make the most sense to invest in, because they're more resilient than almost any of the other companies that we're seeing, especially during this time of crisis. but at the same time, it's like they've been squeezing out the small guy. So it's like I have an obligation to build generational wealth for my family and look out for my family, but also have like a really big moral compass dilemma on like, are they doing the right thing? Are they doing the best thing? Are they putting their money toward things that can help other folks? And then the other part about this that I found very interesting, at least about what Mark Zuckerberg said in all of this, and I know I'm talking very specifically about Facebook in this and not necessarily Apple, but the fact that this is an American company, these are all basically American companies, right? And the fact that the U.S. government would cripple a U.S. company that employs hundreds of thousands of people, right? All of them combined, employ a lot of folks, but they're also squeezing out small businesses in the U.S. But at the same time, if they cripple them, that leaves room for technology companies around the world to swoop in and scoop up some of the things that make those companies so great. So, I mean, it's such a tough thing to really think about. On top of that, and this is the thing that I talked about with my brother, how almost like paradoxical and ironic and like just crazy that you take four companies. It's not like Microsoft in 98 when we were talking about one company, but you take four companies that are essentially all competing against themselves and say that they're representing a monopoly over the industry. I found that to be very interesting and just a compelling thought that these companies, they bid for companies that, they're all fighting for things like Microsoft wasn't there, but I know Amazon got outbid by Microsoft, or intentionally, the U.S. government chose Microsoft over Amazon because Trump doesn't like Bezos or whatever. For the cloud servers or whatever. And, all of these companies, Pichai said something along the lines of like, hey, we work with the Defense Department. Like they're doing a lot of things for the government, all of them. So it's just crazy to me that this is a discussion. I don't know if anything will come of it, but it's certainly very compelling to think about this in all the ways that like breaking up any of these companies has ripple effects for the entire world, quite literally the entire world, and leaves opportunity for China to come in with companies that compete, think TikTok. And on the topic of TikTok, Microsoft potentially buying TikTok. Microsoft, again, wasn't in this congressional hearing, but again, just 20 years ago, Bill Gates was up there chatting away with the congressional hearing, and that company got broke up because they said, hey, you guys are doing too many monopolistic practices. But to see that they could potentially buy TikTok, who's been targeted by the Trump administration for concerns around, what am I thinking of? Concerns around privacy data, that Microsoft would be the company to step in and potentially buy them, as like, won't they face some regulatory scrutiny because, well, hey, is Amazon you're gonna let Amazon do it? You're gonna let Google do it? You're gonna let Facebook do it? Any of those companies could also step in and compete, but that's kind of the way it is. How many other companies can offer? Maybe Walmart. Like, what is Walmart going to do with TikTok? Like, I don't know. It's just crazy to me to think about some of this, and to think that like Walmart, they should be another one that gets like, how many small businesses did they squeeze out, right? Like, how many did they trample over in their rise to where they're at right now, only to see some of the other companies like Amazon kind of give them the stiff arm, right? So I don't know how to talk about this in a way that like makes people feel good, but like it could be really damaging for the U.S. to break up these companies right now. And as much as they've gone out of the way to bail out big banks, I don't know what that would mean if they were to break them up. So very compelling to think about in all of this. Last thing to discuss is my lifestyle. Just changing up things in the face of pandemic. I had initially thought about, and again, my wife was pregnant at the time and late pregnancy because my daughter was born in June. When COVID hit, we were in March, so she was basically 6 months pregnant. From May, June, 6 months pregnant, and I didn't really feel like it was a good thing to try to pick up on the blog or focus on this podcast that I've been thinking about for a really long time. And so I really focused on her, things that we could do together, my other two girls. And again, I'm working remote, so I obviously have to still do my job. But home life has been an adjustment. Man, it has been an adjustment. And the biggest one has probably been adjusting to new work life flow, because with the kids home, getting quiet time is tough. And I don't know what it's going to be like when I'm actually back in full swing, getting in meetings, because I've been on a limited availability paternity leave because of the newborn, and hearing crying, right? Like I'm going to have my mic muted all the time, other than late nights, which I have no meetings at this hours. But, I find it to be interesting to just be in this situation with COVID this long. I just didn't think it would be this long, that at least in the US, that we would be still dealing with this. But here we are. And so some things that have changed, one of the best purchases that we actually made, is a very distinct purchase, was a Breville espresso machine. We purchased it in late March, like 2 weeks after we went remote. And my wife and I figured, we should like start brewing some coffee, because we weren't going to be going to Starbucks anytime soon. And our daily Starbucks thing kind of has gone to the wayside. And even when I go back, I don't ever think I would go back to Starbucks. I've actually enjoyed this process of making my own coffee a lot more with this. And so, I've now, we buy our own beans, mostly from places that we can find, like local coffee roasters. The one I'm going to shout out is Cooperative Coffee. They're in Asheville, North Carolina. We order quite a bit from them. When my mom was down here for my daughter's birth, she was here 2 weeks later. So she stayed 2 weeks. She got to see the Breville. She got to experience the coffee, and she was like, "Hey, this Cooperative Coffee is so good. I want some." So as a thank you for her coming down, I actually ordered her 2 bags of coffee from Cooperative Coffee and had them ship it to her. I also purchased a kitchen scale. We've been doing a lot of baking, and this is really crazy, that just some of the things that you end up searching and reading about. But like flour, if you're a chef and you listen to this, flour is super dense, right? And it's so dense, in fact, that if you took a cup, even if you sifted it, if you took a cup of flour, scooped it up in your cup, leveled it off with your knife or whatever, and then you put it on a scale, and let's say you needed 100 grams of flour, it's probably going to be quite a bit more. You might have 125, 150, because of how dense it is. And after I saw this demonstration of someone like taking a cup, doing the whole scrape with a knife, like just straight out the bag and set it down, it was like twice as much flour than what the recipe called for. And I was like, oh my God, that seems like that would make your food very nasty. And so all of this time, I'm talking pancakes, cookies, cakes, anything that was handmade without any of the straight out the box quick mix stuff, it's probably been too dense, and I didn't know it. And that's why I got a kitchen scale. So another great purchase is getting yourself a kitchen scale to do your baking. Let me tell you, it's life-changing. Some of the cookies that I've had taste so light, airy. Yesterday morning, I had pancakes for the first time using this scale. I just got it, by the way, last week on Saturday. So it would have been like 2 weeks from when you guys hear this, but it was amazing. It was life-altering pancakes, let me tell you. And then the last thing that has really changed is really reading a bunch of books. every now and again I get into these. Initially went to school for computer programming, computer science, but I was also an athlete. So what I found was like I couldn't manage, just personally, I could not manage the schedule between wanting to game, wanting to go out, wanting to play practice, and then having computer programming coursework. And eventually, I got really too involved with gaming and just like, I'm going to go work now because I'm way more interested in this than I am in school. But every now and again, I start getting this urge to get back into programming. And so I spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks refreshing my mind on math, physics, trig, just a bunch of stuff related to programming. And so I'm starting to hop into Python. So that has been an adventure. And I have math books on my desk at the time of this recording. No joke, I really do. And so, that's been. I'm a perpetual learner, in addition to doing a bunch of other things. And so that's a little bit, a snippet of some lifestyle COVID impact on me, and I hope you guys enjoyed this a little bit longer than I think I plan on doing for these. I think I'm going to look for anywhere between 20 to 25 minutes, but I've had a good time with this, and I'm looking forward to the next one. If you guys enjoyed it, please let me know, and I look forward to more Modern Future podcasts in the future. And until the next time, I will catch you guys later. Peace.